Oh, oh God. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Gabesty here. This is the normal quick raid guide for Thok the Bloodthirsty. As usual, you can click on the annotations to check out the full raid guide with more details, or any of the role-specific guides if you just want those. So, the first thing to be aware of for this fight is really the phases that you'll go through. You always start in the roar phase, which is the phase you'll spend most of your time in. And during this period, the entire raid should stack up to the side of the boss, as you see here, for most efficient AE heals. No player should be behind the boss because of a tail swipe attack, and the current tank should be the only player in front because of his cone attack, his breath attack. Now, during this phase, he will gain energy at an ever-increasing rate. Every time he reaches 100 energy, he will Deafening Screech, which interrupts spell casts and does pretty massive damage to the raid. Now, this phase ends automatically when 5 or more players that are within 10 yards of one another have dropped below 50% health. This will cause the boss to go into a frenzy, as you see here, and he will chase a random raid member. So, once this begins, this is your second phase, which is the Fixate phase. So the Fixate or Frenzy phase causes the boss to fixate on random raid members one at a time and to chase them around the room. During this period, if any player gets in front of the boss in melee range, they will be instantly chomped and just destroyed. So, because of this, your melee can pretty much never attack the boss during the Frenzy phase. And instead, your range can do some DPS to him, but your melee are focused on the jailer ad that will spawn at the entrance of the room. Now, during fixates, obviously it's up to the fixated target to run away from the boss, but also try to keep him away from the rest of the raid. So every time he gains a stack of Blood Frenzy during this phase, he will move at a faster rate, and therefore there's a soft enrage of sorts that forces you to end this phase at some point. You just simply can't last very long in it. So, it's up to your raid to decide exactly when is enough fixates, when you can't really outrun him anymore. But try to make use of your own movement abilities, raid-wide sprints, portals, warlock teleports, all that stuff to buy yourself extra time. The way we decided to handle it, that worked pretty well, was to activate the next roar phase by opening one of the cages at the start of the third fixate in the current frenzy phase. So basically, when the third player gets fixated, they keep running like normal because it takes a while for the boss to notice that a cage is open. But once he's noticed, he will disengage from the raid members and go back to his normal business. So to end the frenzy phase, as I mentioned, you have to release a prisoner. You do this by killing the jailer spawn that appears at the entrance, looting the corpse, and getting a key. The player that looted the corpse to get the key buff will be able to open one of the cages around the room. So there are 3 different cages, each holding 3 unique prisoners. And upon releasing the prisoner, after a few moments, Thok will consume them, gain a buff that will last until the next prisoner is consumed, which overwrites his current buff. But generally speaking, this makes Thok stronger, and it forces the raid to deal with a new mechanic, depending on which prisoner it is. So, in no particular order except the one that we did, the prisoners are Water Speaker Garai, which gives Infusion of Frost. This causes a stacking breath debuff on the tanks that will cause the tank to be frozen at 5 stacks. In addition, random raid members are afflicted with an Ice Dot that also will turn them into an Ice Tomb at 5 stacks. So it's just another thing to heal through pretty much during this phase while rotating your tanks appropriately. Akolik is the second boss. He comes from the north cage, where the green marker is there on the left, and he uses Infusion of Acid, which causes acid breath on the tanks, which does heavy nature damage, and also reduces armor by 20% per stack. So again, another reason for tank swaps. And then finally, we have War Master Montauk, who's from the south cage, and he does Infusion of Flame, which gives a Scorching Breath attack, stacking Dot applied to tanks with moderate front damage, and then Burning Blood, which is the most difficult ability for the raid to deal with overall. This ability causes puddles of fire under random raid members that deal heavy damage per second. So, for this reason, when War Master Montauk is activated and his cage is opened, the raid pretty much is forced to spread out during this period and only stack up once you're comfortable with how long you've been in the normal phase and you feel like you can actually push things along by stacking up. So remember that everyone has to be, or at least 5 people have to be below 50% health and then within 10 yards of one another. But because of the puddles that you see on the ground there, it's difficult to do that at the right time. So for this reason, we found it was best to do War Master Montauk last, but depending on your DPS, you may still need to go into another fixate phase after that third prisoner. So it'll be up to your raid to decide the order of your prisoners, but we did Water Speaker first, then Acolyte second, and then War Master Montauk third. The final thing worth mentioning is that War Master Montauk will give a 1 minute DPS increasing buff to everyone in the raid that basically causes them to do extra fire damage when they attack. Acolyte does something that I cannot figure out what it does, but it's supposed to be beneficial. And then finally, Water Speaker Gorai will heal everyone for about 500,000 at the start of the phase. So for the most part, War Master Montauk is the only real buff that makes any difference to you. And that's it. It's a pretty basic fight mechanically, so really it's just a matter of staying in the normal roar phase as long as you can, stacked with your raid, until you simply cannot out-damage or out-heal or out-cooldown the damage. And once you're in the fixate phase, go as long as you're comfortable with before opening the next cage and repeating the process. And as long as you have enough DPS and healing, you should eventually get them down. That is the normal quick raid guide for Thok the Bloodthirsty. As always, good luck, and thanks for watching.